This is the Financial Voice, discussing rebuilding Bahamas tourism in commemoration of World Tourism Day. Coming to you live from TCL Studios. The Financial Voice is sponsored by the Bahamas Ministry of Tourism, Bahamar, Aquapure, KFC, Commonwealth Bank Limited, FOCAL, Doctors Hospital Health System, and Sun Oil.
Good evening, and welcome to this virtual session of the Financial Voice, a brand of the Consulars Limited. Tonight, we are commemorating World Tourism Day, a celebration led by the World Tourism Organization of the United Nations to raise global awareness about the importance of tourism and its social, cultural, political, and economic value. This session is coming to you this evening on RTV cable channel 212 and also streaming live at the Financial Voice on Facebook. The program will air again on RTV 212 on World Tourism Day, Sunday, September 27th. This session is dedicated to the late David Johnson, who served as Director General from 2010 to 2014. Mr. Johnson, or DJ as he was affectionately called, is recognized as a tourism pioneer and consummate professional, having served the industry for 45 years in various public and private sector roles.
We have the need, a clear need, as shared by both the Minister of Finance and Minister of Investment, to stimulate our gross domestic product and improve government's earning. There's two strategies to making the Bahamas, the quality of life in the Bahamas, much better than we have today. One is we have to manage our costs. We have to be able to pay for the services that government provide. We can't do that simply through collecting our taxes efficiently. We have to also grow the economy, and the government recognizes the need to do both. And on the tourism side, our job is to find ways to generate profitable tourism that complement the efforts of the Ministry of Finance in supporting us. Back to seeing what we're looking at, we must begin recognizing what the performance has been. We must take steps now to bear on stimulating the economic development required to grow government needs, as I said, rather than relying simply on, and too largely, on tax revenues. We need to strengthen the base and find ways to grow the base. We are using in tourism less than 40% of our capacity as a country, less than 40% of our capacity when we look at the entire Bahamas. We need to understand that just as destinations offerings exist that visitors prefer, there are business models that investors prefer, and we need to sharpen our negotiations to ensure that we are competitive in attracting the investment. And when we say investment, it's not foreign. Too often we think investment is foreign. We're talking about all with the appetite and the inclination to invest. And we need more Bahamians investing in the sector. Repeating it, but making the point that we really need to expand and support Bahamian ownership in our sector, so that we're not just attracting jobs, but we're getting a much healthier return on our overall investment and our assets.
Good evening once again. May his soul rest in peace. I am Kerry Fountain, Executive Director of the Bahama Out Islands Promotion Board and a proud veteran of the Bahamas tourism industry. I am pleased to be your host for this groundbreaking program, Rebuilding Bahamas Tourism, which focuses on the future of the industry as it navigates a pandemic. On behalf of the TCL Group, I thank RTV for its communications partnership and the show's sponsors for their generous support. I would also like to give a special shout out to the After Group, an association of former Bahamas Ministry of Tourism employees. So, how important is tourism to the Bahamas economy? Vital. It employs more Bahamians, puts more money into the national treasury, and supplies more of the foreign exchange we need for external trade than any other industry. In a 2019 rating of countries worldwide with the highest share of GDP generated by direct travel and tourism, our small country placed 8th. Being tourism dependent, we must also bear in mind that tourism is an industry subject to a variety of negative impacts, external and internal, some beyond our control. Hurricane Dorian and now COVID-19 have proved just that. The COVID-19 pandemic entered the global ring in the latter part of 2019 and landed a haymaker punch to the vital organs of tourism destinations around the world, including the Bahamas. The virus forced border closures, restrictions on air travel and cruise tourism, and local curfews and lockdowns. In a domino effect, hotels, restaurants, and various attractions stumbled or shut down. The COVID-19 knockout resulted in 67 million fewer international tourists traveling up to March, bringing about a total revenue loss of $195 billion worldwide in the first 4 months of 2020. Tonight, we have an unprecedented gathering of internationally respected experts for our broadcast. They are 4 people who have served as Director General of Tourism, contributing significantly to the growth of the industry. It is my pleasure, my honor, to introduce the current office holder, Joy Jibrelu, who took office in 2014. Next is Subaltern Bethel, who served from 1978 to 1992. We also have with us Mr. Vincent Vanderpool Wallace, who held the post from 1992 to 2005, and Ms. Vernice Joaquin, who served from 2005 to 2010. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for so generously giving of your time to share with us this evening. Let's get started. The first question I'm going to pose to Ms. Joy Jibrelu. Joy, if we are talking about rebuilding, we must clarify why it's necessary. How big a hit has Bahamas tourism and our economy taken from COVID-19 in terms of visitor arrivals, employment, national income, and infrastructure development? And then there's just one last part to that question. And is the hit that we took, is that the same in the region and around the world? Your mic.
Unmute. All right.
Thank you very much. That's going to be the most repeated word during this period. You're on mute. Good evening, Bahamas, and good evening, Kerry. I guess when you're the newest kid on the block, you get to go out first. But I do want to, first of all, begin by expressing my thanks to the TCL Group for assembling such an august group of tourism veterans and leaders to talk about rebuilding Bahamas tourism. I am truly both honored and humbled to be in their midst. Before answering the question, Kerry, and it was a long one, I do want to remind that this occasion actually celebrates World Tourism Day, as you said, coming up on the 27th of September. And its theme this year is tourism and rural development. This acknowledges the leading role of tourism as a driver of socio-economic development, employment, and entrepreneurial opportunity for rural communities in particular. So this is particularly pertinent to us in the Bahamas as we think in our own setting of family islands and the incredible value that they bring to our own tourism offering. Now to answer your question, and I think I need to provide some context to it. And I want to do that by referencing 2019. And I know everyone knows the stats, but just as I said, for a context setting purpose, 2019 was a banner year for Bahamian tourism. Destination welcomed over 7.2 million visitors, and this was an increase of approximately 9.4% over 2018. In fact, until COVID struck, we had seen visitor arrivals growing for the last 10 years, culminating in last year, where we recorded our best ever visitor stopover arrival numbers of just under 1.8 million visitors. So we were really on a good wicket. And if we look at cruise tourism as well, cruise tourism had also continued to do very well over this period. We now come into 2020, and we are mindful of the fact that we performed very well in 2019, even with experiencing the threat of Hurricane Dorian that wiped out two of our major tourism centers, Abaco and Grand Bahama. And I think what that demonstrated to us is the multiplicity of islands that we have on offer meant that we could continue with tourism as we all work together to rebuild those two islands impacted by Dorian. But the beginning of 2020, March 2020, coronavirus, COVID-19 was declared a pandemic, and this brought a literal stop to travel and tourism. In fact, for the months of April and May globally, we saw a decline of travel and tourism of 90 to 100%. That was across the world. Global record, 90 to 100%. Those were just for the months of April and May, so let's be clear. But if we look at the first 6 months of the year, January through to June, the UNWTO tells us the declines were approximately 65%. And then if I look at our figures in the Bahamas, we see that for the corresponding period of January through to June, we saw declines of 66%. So we seem to be trending with the global trend there. And if we look at what the forecast looks like through to the end of the year, UNWTO is projecting declines of between 58 to 78%. So if we think that the Bahamas has been trending in line with global reports, that's where we expect to end up anywhere between 58 to 78% in declines. So with such declines in tourism visitor arrival numbers, we know that this would have impacted our economy significantly. If we look at the contribution of tourism to our GDP, approximately 50%, depending on which figures you use, 50% employment, the hit has been tremendous. In fact, Ministry of Finance's reporting projected losses of about $600 million for the period that we have been in lockdown or reduced travel activity to the Bahamas. So this tends to be in line as well with what we're seeing. Declines across the board. Travel and tourism is a global industry. Everyone's been experiencing it, and we're all coming out of it at the same time. And that really sets a picture for the discussion that we're going to have tonight. To put in context the importance of tourism to our economy, where we were, how we were trending for 10 years through to the end of 2019, in fact, through to January 2020, the impact of coronavirus, so apt that we're talking about rebuilding tourism in the Bahamas this evening. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you for a very comprehensive answer, and that your answer actually lays the groundwork for the rest of this evening. I just hope we get it together come October 15th when we reopen.
Yeah.
The next question I'd like to pose to Subaltern. Subaltern, Ann Richards, the Chief Executive Officer of Fidelity International, advises against rebuilding the past. She suggests taking the opportunity to reinvent business models. Is this necessary, and in what ways should we propose to innovate?
Thank you, Kerry, for that question. I'm very pleased to be with you on this program this evening, together with my esteemed former colleagues who have served as Directors General of Tourism. And as we come together tonight, we also would like to express appreciation to Mrs. Joan Aubrey for organizing this program, and certainly for all of those who are involved in making it happen. In rebuilding Bahamas tourism as a result of the severe health, social, and economic impact of the COVID-19 global pandemic, as has just been outlined by the Director General of Tourism. Let us not forget that tourism, which is the main engine of our economy, has been good for the Bahamas and has served us well. Despite the fact that it has always been subject to external shocks of various kinds and internal shocks of nature, like hurricanes, all beyond our control. I certainly observed during the period of 14 years of my tenure, firsthand, these particular shocks. However, we were prepared to meet them, and we met them head on. The shocks included several economic recessions, shortages of oil and gas, energy crisis, the escalation of fuel charges, various airline bankruptcies, effects of tourism, especially in the European markets, the Gulf War, stock market crash, and rise in competition from low-cost destinations. We met those challenges and implemented innovative plans, strategies, and programs that resulted in Bahamian tourism remaining remarkably resilient. Visitor arrivals grew from 1.4 million to 3.7 million annually. National tourism receipts were in excess of $14 billion, and over 40 million visitors were attracted to the Bahamas over this period, and we became the #1 destination in the region. This was accomplished through close cooperation and collaboration between the public and private sectors. All stakeholders and the public were constantly involved, and we forged meaningful and productive relationships with our overseas travel trade partners, airlines, cruise lines, etc., and investors. We constantly kept our business model under review. The present COVID-19 global pandemic presents unprecedented challenges with the extremely negative impact on the economy, as we have just heard. And this is an impact like we have never witnessed before. It will take time, innovation, new strategies, enormous costs and sacrifice to the government, the industry, employers, employees, to rebuild and recover. The cooperation and the compliance of the entire public to health protocols will be necessary. Recovery and the opening of hotels and attractions will only take place on a large scale when COVID-19 is brought under control within the entire population. In reinventing business models and implementing innovations, such action should be taken with the full input of all stakeholders, with wide public and private sector participation. Business models should ideally be developed as part of a tourism master plan for every island destination within the Bahamas and be incorporated as a major segment of the overall national development plan, which is long overdue and has been a work in progress. It is very timely for the Bahamas to embrace the thinking of global economy and tourism authorities about a reset of tourism with innovation, conservation, sustainability, inclusiveness, and community development. Even more relevant to the Bahamas is the World Economic Forum position of the need for competitiveness, tourism management, and the carrying capacity of the destination. With respect to the competitiveness, the Bahamas is a high-cost destination. Some of the main impediments include the very high costs and unreliable supply of electricity, the need to reduce the use of fossil fuels and embrace the use of lower cost and more efficient and environmentally friendly LNG and solar energy. The need is also there to increase the level of productivity in the workplace among some management and sectors of employees. The delivery of value for money is also another matter which comes high on the agenda at this time. With respect to tourism management, the Bahamas is a mature and leading destination in the region, with strong and efficient public and private sectors. As such, and in light of the current prevailing circumstances, the time has come when the private sector bodies like hotels and promotion boards should assume primary responsibility for marketing using levies now collected, and the Ministry of Tourism should focus mainly on tourism policy, public relations, product enhancement, licensing, quality controls, tourism, and environmental development. In addition to the government funding of the Ministry of Tourism, the promotion boards and large resorts should also make some contribution to product development and the enhancement of the environment. In return for major concessions and incentives from the government to major resorts, which is a matter of concern by international bodies, consideration might be given to the government being granted equity in return for the concessions. Another innovation would be a modest environmental levy on cruise passengers, which would be imposed on cruise lines. On the carrying capacity of the destination, there are some pressing areas of concern which must be addressed, especially in light of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and future health requirements. One, health facilities and services in prime destinations like New Providence, Grand Bahama, Abaco, Bimini, Eleuthera, Exuma, San Salvador, they all need to have their health services and facilities upgraded, not only to meet the current needs of the population, but also the larger needs of the millions of visitors.
So, Baltran,
yes, sir.
I'm going to have to ask you to put a pause because we need to go to a station break.
Thank you.
And when we come back, you can quickly wrap up, and so I can get to some other questions to the other panelists.
I'll only need 2 minutes to wrap up.
Okay. And now, Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Our phone lines are open. You may call 322-1000, 322-1000, or text 242-466-8899 with your questions. Our panel will address your questions later in the show. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
What does support look like? What does it sound like when you feel the pulse of a nation? When you make a difference in the lives of strong, principled, cultured people who are driven by hard work and passion. People who build communities where hospitality is warmly demonstrated, because this is the Bahamas and we're happy to share our wealth. Commonwealth Bank, built by Bahamians, here for Bahamians. Bahamians helping Bahamians.
Being the best doesn't just happen. It requires deliberate hard work. When you set out to be the best, you have to be sure. Sure of your goals. Sure of your abilities. You have to be sure-footed. Sure you're focused. Sure you're ready. Sure you're doing everything right. Never settle for less. Be sure.
Since 1967, Freeport Oil Company Limited has been dedicated to fueling growth and prosperity in the Bahamas. We have been a constant pillar within the country, striving to invest and support our community through the best of times and the worst of times. For us, Full Call represents 21 years of strength and consistency, consistent leadership, consistent growth, consistent customer service. Through it all, we are resilient. Full Call, fueling growth for people.
Introducing KFC's newest fill-up, the Mac and Cheese Bowl. It's ooey gooey good. Ooh, cheese. Ooh, chicken. Cheese. Chicken. $5. Chicken. Cheese. $5. Look at all those fill-ups. Popcorn chicken, famous bowl, hot wings, fried chicken and mac and cheese bowl. 5 options for $5 each. Fill up at KFC Nassau.
So the project really pays itself back.
Correct.
They set up
at the conference, the school.
As a journalist, I always have to focus on the facts, and sometimes that means going to investigate for myself. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. right here on RTV.
The Financial Voice is sponsored by the Bahamas Ministry of Tourism, Bahamar, Aquapure, KFC, Commonwealth Bank Limited, Focall, Doctors Hospital Health System, and Sun Oil.
Welcome back to this virtual session of TCL's The Financial Voice, brought to you by RTV Cable Channel 212. We are celebrating World Tourism Day and pondering how to reset Bahamas tourism. I'm your host, Kerry Fountain, and joining me are 4 tourism experts, Subaltern Bethel, Vernice Joaquin, Joy Gibralou, and Vincent Vanderpool Wallace. Subaltern, what I heard you said in the first session, you talked about value for money. You talked about managing our cost. You also talked about increasing productivity. Before I move on to the other panelists, do you want to add anything else?
Just 2 things. With our immediate concern, subject to the approval of the health authorities and the competent authority. Consideration should be given to the proposal made only yesterday by the head of IATA, that consideration to be given by global airlines would be able to enforce pre-screening with a rapid COVID test for all international passengers so as to replace the quarantine period, which I know is giving great concern to the Ministry of Tourism and to hoteliers. This rapid and affordable antigen test would cost only in the region of some $10, and it would certainly go a long way to moving us forward in the flow of business. And then lastly, there is also, if we are going to maximize the flow of tourism to the Family Islands, the pressing need to upgrade the Family Island international airports by IATA and FAA standards and to meet the current COVID protocols. And to do this, of course, the necessary funding is going to be needed. And one area in which we may be able to assist with that would be to complete the FIR negotiations with the US government and the FAA so that the overflight fees might then come into the coffers of the Bahamas to fund and to meet the requirements of international airports at this present time.
Subaltern, you have not lost a step. and when we talk about ideas, you've listed about 6 or 7, and I'm sure the current DG, she was taking notes and would like to have a follow-up conversation with you. Vincent, before we really get into the second part of the session, there was one question I wanted to ask you. Today, the global tourism sector is very much engaged in digital transformations. The new buzzwords are Tourism 4.0 or Smart Tourism. How are we planning, or how should we be planning to increase Bahamas tourism's digital footprint? And what's happening in the region and globally?
Well, I think there's a lot of stuff that's happening. First of all, again, real joy and pleasure to be with this group, and joy that isn't specifically for you, that's joy for everybody, just so you know. It's a real joy to be with this group, and hope we get together more frequently. But to go specifically to your question, Carrie, the odd thing is that a lot of what is happening in the digitizing side is really being forced by the pandemic. I mean, people just simply trying to find ways to have some kind of contactless transactions. And so suddenly things that we were I'm finding some difficulty getting people to do, they're now doing automatically. Even our own community, you see more and more people communicating on Zoom and whatever it else is, and people are talking to family members all over the world in ways they never did before. So all kinds of new things are being introduced in that particular side of our life. And I know the Ministry of Tourism, for example, is beginning to look at some very significant changes that is going to, I believe, enable them to communicate with their customers in ways that they never ever did before, to be able to personalize itineraries for people coming in to the country, to enable transactions to happen more readily with some of the smaller vendors around the Bahamas, because so many people coming into the country have credit cards as opposed to cash. And we all know that people with credit cards many times are a lot more liberal in their spending than they ever did before. So the whole world is being more digitized. And when you take a look at, for example, things like Airbnb, when you look at it, it really is a digital transformation that enables a lot more individual Bahamians to get directly involved in the business that they never did before. Quite frankly, Airbnb is very little more than people to people on a commercial level. So this wonderful program that we had in place for a long time, we were doing it for free. There are now people being able to do it individually and earn money from it. So we see a sea change. That the cost of storing paper, the cost of processing paper, all of that is being eliminated by the digitizing of a whole number of areas. And I am convinced that what you're going to see the Ministry of Tourism coming through with in a number of areas that are going to make a significant difference to what is happening in tourism. And if you look around across the region and across the world, people are using digital systems now to manage pandemic in terms of keeping track of people, making sure that they attest to whatever their position is when they wake up in the morning, to ensure they can go out and mingle with other people and ensure that they have none of the indicators that suggest that they might be infected in any particular way. So there is a sea change we see going on in the use of digital systems across tourism in a way that has never happened before and has really been forced in very many degrees by the pandemic. The final point is, when you take a look at what the people at the Ministry of Health come on and talk about every single time, a lot of the stuff they're talking about is digitized. So I think we have a very strange situation where we all lament the arrival of this pandemic, but I suggest at the end of the day, we're going to find that we are far better off by using some of the digital systems that arose as a result of this pandemic being in place. So I'm very, very excited about the opportunities that we see on the horizon.
You kept on alluding to the digital initiatives that are being pondered at the Ministry of Tourism. You don't care to be specific, do you?
No. that is for the Ministry of Tourism to talk about specifically, as opposed to that. And, but beyond that, though, Kerry, I know of a group of people who are putting together an over-the-hill GPS guided tour. You can go and look at it tomorrow. There is a sports heroes tour of the Bahamas. You can go look at it tomorrow. So the digital use of people booking things in advance and paying for it in advance before they come to the Bahamas, all of that is beginning to come to the fore in ways. And so I am sure that when we come out of this pandemic, we're going to have a lot more product and a lot more capability than we ever did before. But I will leave whatever announcements to be made to the Ministry of Tourism.
Well, Mia Mottley, the Prime Minister of Barbados, she said, a good pandemic is a bad thing to let go to waste. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure we're going to be hearing more from Joy and her team at the Ministry of Tourism. Fernice,
yes.
What is the latest on the advancement of air travel infrastructure and overall quality of the travel experience in our islands, starting off with Nassau, and if you may, in the Family Islands?
Thanks, Kerry. As everyone else has said, I truly do consider it an honor to be on this distinguished panel. So thank you, Joan and the Councillors Limited, for the opportunity. In terms of air service and the infrastructure to support it, we find ourselves at an interesting point, and I think all of the previous speakers have spoken to this in some varying degrees. Airports are critical infrastructure. They're assets for particularly countries and economies that are tourism dependent. And because, they represent the opportunity for stopover visitors, which obviously represents revenue for countries and what have you. So, before the pandemic, airports were largely focused on how could they process people as quickly as possible to get them through all of the check-in, bag drop, security screening, and what have you, get them to the hold rooms and or shopping, food and beverage, so that they could spend money and then get on the aircraft. So the focus was on, making processes much quicker, so people didn't queue for very long. They could go through their security process, whether you're talking about the use of, I forget the word for it now, but the scanning equipment, so that, people don't have to be any place for very long. This pandemic, however, has created a new or an evolution, if you will, for airports, in the sense that airports now have to worry about health and safety, and not just safety as in air safety, but in terms of people being safe within an environment, given all of the focus on, how COVID is transmitted. So aircraft and airports are particularly vulnerable and have to be seen to be safe environments because of how this pandemic started and evolved, and all of the focus on it spreading on aircraft and so on. Whether that's true or not, that's perception is reality and so on. So airports now find themselves having to be mindful of processes and systems that all come together to give that passenger moving through it a sense that the environment is safe and their health will be protected while they're in that environment. I say all of that to say that here at LPIA, for example, that airport actually, just today we got word that we actually had the distinction of being the second airport in the region to get a health accreditation from the Airports Council International. Why is that important that for an airport to be given a health accreditation? It's important because people look now for airports to be in a particular category because it then suggests to them that you are going to provide them with a safe environment. They know that the environment is sanitized and has all of the protocols in place to keep them safe while they're in that environment. So airports going forward, I think will find themselves not just thinking about how they move people through quickly, they're going to have to think about how they keep people safe in that environment. And that means allowing for social distancing as required, allowing touchless technology to be put to the test, as Vincent talked about. And so what does that mean for airports throughout the Bahamas? I think no matter the size, I think those airports are going to have to evolve to a point where they can provide that kind of technology that will allow people to understand that they don't need people on top of them. They don't need to be, crowded in any way. They can get through all of the processes they need to safely, quickly, efficiently. And so the focus is going to be not just on efficient movement of people, but also on healthy, safe, efficient movement of people. Touchless technology from start to finish. So I don't need to engage with any people to check in. I don't need to engage with any people to drop my bag. I don't need to engage with any people. Even at security screening, I can walk through a machine, stand there, let the machine check me out. I go upstairs, or I go through into the lounge. I can buy food, drink without engaging with anybody. I swipe my card or whatever it is. So airports have to evolve to provide that kind of an environment where people feel safe and they therefore have the ability to enjoy that experience.
Well, Bernice, congratulations on the honor or the award that you just received. Mm-hmm. And I hope in your position of influence, you could ensure that we win some awards at our airports in the Family Islands.
That's coming next.
Okay,
we'll work on that. We'll work on that.
Okay. Thank you, panel. You're watching TCL Group's The Financial Voice. We're discussing how to get tourism, the nation's primary revenue earner, back on track and the opportunities to do so. Our phone lines are open. You may call 322-1000 or text 242-466-8899 with your questions. Our panel will take your questions in the next segment. Coming up right back after this commercial break.
Performance speaks for itself. Pennzoil Synthetics, made from natural gas. Make the switch.
Welcome to Doctors Hospital. As the Bahamas reopens, we at Doctors Hospital have been hard at work preparing for the new normal. The health and safety of our patients, associates, and others entering the hospital space is ever paramount and shapes the experience as you enter our facilities. All persons entering the hospital will be COVID screened, which includes a temperature check and a few short questions. There's also mandatory hand and shoe washing stations upon entry. Masks are required and can be provided if necessary. To further limit contact, Doctors Hospital has launched a concierge service that allows for pre-registration, a hospital itinerary, in-car waiting, and a navigator to guide you through your visit. Our pharmacy is now offering curbside pickup and delivery services for prescriptions as well. Social distancing markers are placed around the facility, and scheduling for imaging, including CAT scans, mammograms, and 3T MRIs. Laboratory, including our new same-day COVID-19 PCR testing, rehabilitation, and other services, has also been adjusted. Doctors Hospital is here to serve you with the same quality and care that you've come to expect, even as we enter a new normal. Now, more than ever, Doctors Hospital continues to be trusted and best care now. Isn't your health worth it?
Our world has changed. Many businesses have been closed for months with little or no access to their customers until now. Rev Media can help you remain connected to your customers. Our trusted customized advertising packages and personalized consultants will provide your business with immeasurable support during this challenging time. Your customers are already watching. Rev Media can help you to remain connected. Call us today. Let us help you.
The Financial Voice is sponsored by the Bahamas Ministry of Tourism, Bahamar, Aquapure, KFC, Commonwealth Bank Limited, FOCAL, Doctors Hospital Health System, and Sun Oil.
Welcome back to the Financial Voice, coming to you on the RTV, cable channel 212, and streaming at the Financial Voice on Facebook. We're discussing rebuilding Bahamas tourism with our esteemed panel, including the current Director General, Joy Jibrelu, and 3 former office holders, Vincent Vanderpool Wallace, Principal Partner of the Bedford Baker Group, which provides advisory services on travel and tourism to governments and travel and hospitality-related companies. Vernice Joaquin, President and CEO, Nassau Airport Development. And Subaltern Bethel, the first Director General of Tourism, as well as contributor to the hospitality industry and other aspects of national life. And I should correct that, the first Bahamian Director General.
Thank you.
Panel, our Minister of Tourism and Aviation, Dionisio de Aguilar, has called tourism a collective economic force, one in which every citizen and resident is involved, whether we or they like it or not. Similarly, the International Organization Partners for Livable Communities opines that tourism is too important a resource to be left just to the tourism professionals. Tourism needs to be a part of a community mobilization strategy. Joy, in resetting Bahamas tourism to increase the benefit spread, how can we get more cross-industry collaboration, public-private engagement, and more community-wide participation, especially in the Family Islands?
Kerry, such a great question, and particularly at a time like this. I know that everyone on this panel will agree with me when I say that public-private engagement is so very important, and not only to address the development of beneficial policy and strategies perhaps for development of the sector, but in response to issues and problems that arise as well as for business support activities. And I'm saying particularly at this time, like the coordination of marketing efforts. I know you at the Bahamas Out Island Promotion Board know how important it has been, us collaborating, working together. And that level of collaboration has gone across all of the promotion boards, all of our hotel partners. And it has ensured that we have maximized the few dollars that all of us are dealing with and will continue to be dealing with at the end of this, when we're coming out of this, to showcase the Bahamas, but working strategically together so that we're not going into each other's territory. I also want to reference 2 other quick examples of what I view as excellent public-private sector partnership initiatives that the Ministry of Tourism has had the privilege of being involved with recently. One, the Tourism Readiness and Recovery Committee. That was a committee made up of public-private sector players in the tourism industry, ministries of tourism, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but all of our promotion boards, our hotel partners, our private sector vendors. In fact, over 100 businesses came on board as we looked and worked together to come up with strategies as to how we would come out of this pandemic with protocols in place, focusing on health and safety. But a less known initiative that is key and is so important to our family islands is an initiative dealing with community tourism clusters. The Bahamas was chosen, one out of 6 countries in this region. There were 55 countries actually that applied for an IDB grant, and the Bahamas was chosen. Andros is the test case, and this is where partners are coming together, whether the National Trust, Bahamas Out Island Promotion Board, hotels, all coming to create a cluster, a tourism cluster. And if this cluster is successful, and all indications are that they are doing an incredible job, they get $400,000 that will help them to advance tourism at a community level on North and Central Andros. But the beauty of that is that's only the beginning. This is an initiative that we see opportunities to be spread across all of our family islands. So I know that's music to your ears, Carrie.
Yeah, I was on a call today with Crystal Bethel and the team. And another example, Joy, is I know we have been trying to identify a rapid test because we've been encouraged as an industry when we reopen come October 15th to test the hoteliers, hotel owners are being encouraged to test their employees. And I know we're trying to come up with a rapid test that is not only affordable and effective, but you get results within 10 to 15 minutes.
Carrie, just give me 1 minute. You asked a loaded question of Vincent. Subaltern raised some points, and we are encouraged. The Prime Minister did announce today that quarantine is falling away, but the Ministry of Tourism is coming out with the details. So there's a lot of information coming out of us, and including on rapid tests. So I just want to drop that little teaser there. Stay tuned. We look forward to being able to share some positive developments that will help us move out of this current situation that we find ourselves in and the barriers to tourism.
Okay. Vincent, how should we be resetting to ensure that more tourism income remains in the Bahamas and Bahamians benefit more meaningfully across the board? And I know that was one of the goals of tourism that you had established before you left or when you first came in as the Director General.
Well, let's start with a very big one. I think it may have been in January of this year, the Minister of Tourism and Aviation signed an agreement, an air services agreement, or maybe it was in 2014, I forget exactly when it was, an air services agreement with the United States that really allows a lot more Bahamian carriers to begin to provide services for visitors coming into the country. So one of the things that we forget is many times, whatever the visitor is paying for their vacation, a significant portion of that is the airfare. Why should we not be much more involved in getting a piece of that airfare? And so I know there's been a webinar recently bringing a number of the carriers in the Bahamas up to speed on how they can begin to participate more in that. The second area is something that may sound a little arcane, but the simple fact is make sure that a lot more payments come directly into the Bahamas. There are so many payments that are made for tourism products that never arrive in the Bahamas. And some of those people really only send that portion of it has to pay for goods and services in the Bahamas, as opposed to getting the circulation of money coming here. I mean, Subaltern remembers something from a long, long time ago. I'm not suggesting this be reinstated, but you remember once upon a time, Subaltern, there was something called the tour operator contract, where anybody who was bonded in the Bahamas had to have a tour connected with their package. Must. And so when we start talking about some of the ways we're negotiating with people, get a lot more people to buy a lot more product before they get here. Because one of the issues many times is people fly and flop. You know, if they get to a big resort or someplace, they fly there, they lay down, they flop. But if they purchase something in advance, they will go out and use it. And so getting people moving around, and when they get around and using it, now you get a lot more transportation being spent in terms of moving around. And then there are things that are kind of obvious that we keep talking about and haven't done a good job of, is in terms of agriculture and fisheries. I mean, why are we still importing so much of the stuff that our visitors consume as opposed to us growing it and taking it out of our waters and providing? I mean, the notion of us continuing to import fish to the degree that we do in the Bahamas should be something of a national disgrace. So we should begin to do a great deal more of that kind of subsidy. And then my 100% pet peeve is Bahamian fruit baskets. I want to know why we can't get that done. That's my litmus test for us being able to do some very simple things. I mean, if you go and buy a fruit basket almost anywhere in the Bahamas today, it has 100% foreign fruits. We're nuts. Why do we keep allowing this stuff? And we got all this fruit rotting and falling off the trees and et cetera in the Bahamas. And we have done this before successfully, and people are quite excited about it. So the idea of substituting a lot of the services and a lot of the products that are now being provided by people outside the Bahamas, provided by people in the Bahamas, and provide all the incentives we need to get people building up the street. So that's one of the ways for us to begin to grow the income that is retained in the Bahamas instead of so much of it leaving almost on an immediate round trip as soon as it arrives.
And in order to do that, I know we have to start to do a lot of online selling, a lot of online commercial. We definitely need to improve in that area.
Absolutely.
Bernice.
Yes.
What, in your opinion, are we doing to increase Bahamian ownership in the various sectors of our tourism plan?
Well, this is a really good segue to what Vincent just talked about. I think one of my biggest pet peeves, I'll just be frank with it, is the fact that I think Bahamians still have this love-hate relationship with tourism. You know, it's that thing we do, but it's not really that thing that we enjoy doing. It's almost like we are engaged in tourism while we're waiting for something else to come along. There's all this discussion about diversification and that sort of thing, which it bothers me in the sense that we've not maximized tourism, but we're looking for alternatives. It's almost as though we don't want to be in the business of tourism. Like, why are we even bothering with this industry? When in fact, this industry is the largest growth industry in the world. Every country around the world is engaged in tourism, call it tourism or not. And this pandemic has absolutely proven that to be the case. So why would we in the Bahamas, who have some natural advantages that have always served us well, not take advantage of those advantages, those unique features and benefits that we have? So this is why, Kerry, the answer to your question about why or how do we encourage more Bahamians to have ownership of this industry? Bahamians, generally speaking, for a long time, have not wanted to own this industry because they considered it to be fickle. They considered it to be temporary. It's something we're doing while we wait for something else to come along. And that's just not the case. We have been in the tourism business for well over a century and a half. So, and we've actively developed it, certainly for the last half century. So let's not kid ourselves that we're going to, any time in our lifetime, replace tourism. So we need to be sensible about this and think about how do we strip tourism down to the lowest common denominator in terms of all the things Vincent just talked about, all of the things Joy talked about in terms of community tourism, so that we understand how we grab our share of what tourism can produce. That's how we need to think about this and stop looking at it as why should we buy a hotel or why should we build a hotel? Because you see what happened with this pandemic where tourism shut down and we need to find an alternative. Well, tourism continues to demonstrate that it is the most resilient sector, industry in the world. If you look at the last 50 years, every time there's been a crisis that impacted tourism has rebounded and has flourished. And this time will be no different. So if we don't yet believe that tourism is here to stay, we're never going to want to own it, Kerry, to answer your question. And that is my biggest pet peeve, because I don't know why over all these years we've not been able to preach the gospel of how tourism can save us economically, and we continue to disrespect it and act as though we're going to, struggle through it until something better comes along. There's not going to be something better that comes along, because all of the traditional industries like oil and gas, are going bye-bye. I mean, look at what's happened in the Middle East, where they have actively sought to replace their oil because they know that's going to run out. That's a finite product. It's going to run out. We're not going to run out of beaches unless we destroy them all. So the point I'm making, Carrie, is that the only way to encourage Bahamians to take more ownership of this industry is for Bahamians to begin to respect what this industry has provided for us and can, in fact, provide for us. You played that video of David Johnson earlier saying we've really only gotten about 40% of this industry, that we've only achieved or, about 40% of what we are capable of from this industry. I believe that to be true still. And David said that a few years ago, God rest his soul. So we have a lot more to extract from tourism. And but the starting point is for us to believe that we ought to own this industry, that it's not a temporary thing. It's not a fickle thing. It is solid, it is resilient, and it has the capacity to deliver so much more income to all of us if we believe that it has that capacity.
Yeah.
So I'll stop the gospel right there.
Thank you. No, I allowed you because I wanted you to stay on that pulpit. And I try to share that same thing. We have an endowment with the University of the Bahamas. And, the students ask us, well, what is there to do in the business of tourism? You don't have to always own a hotel. You don't have to always work behind a front desk.
Right.
There's so many small hotels in the Family Islands that need, quote unquote, online help. How to have a business listing with TripAdvisor, how to keep your information updated on Bahamas.com. A lot of hoteliers in the outer islands are older and are sort of not tech savvy. And so, but as a university student, if I'm in the computer class, how do I get together with some of my friends, my student friends or colleagues, and talk to some of these folks and see what it is that what
kind of platform you could provide for them to sell this product? Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
Baltron, just before we wrap up, in Rwanda, a 3,700-member cooperative of rice farmers own the Natende Hotel, a 2-star facility. Could cooperative action be an avenue for more Bahamians to achieve greater ownership in tourism and hospitality? And are there examples, are there examples already in play?
The answer is yes. There is, of course, as has just been presented by Bernice, far too few Bahamians who are involved in ownership, not only of hotels, but also of the services which are provided to the tourism industry. There is no reason why unions could not get together and become involved as they have done in Rwanda. Let me also indicate that we need to be looking at different models with regard to the Bahamians becoming involved in the development of hotels. An excellent model was recently brought to the forefront of the development of Jack's Bay, which involves the Franklin Wilson group of Bahamians. And they're following very much a model like the one at Albany, where they combine real estate development with hospitality. And in this way, you're able to raise capital as you go along with the residential component and enjoy all of the facilities of a resort. So yes, cooperatives, groups of individuals, there are some fine examples which can be utilized to get Bahamians involved. There's also the opportunity which could become available through encouragement of Bahamians also investing and becoming investors in major resorts, which are owned by foreign investors. These are all a number of opportunities that Bahamians should and could be embracing in order to get an ownership position within the hotel industry.
Good. Thank you, Subaltern. And thank you, panel. You're watching TCL Group's The Financial Voice, Rebuilding Bahamas Tourism. Our phone lines are open now. You may call 322-1000 or text the number that I shared earlier with your questions. Our panel will take your questions, I promise, in the next segment. Coming up right back after this commercial break.
Introducing KFC's newest fill-up, the Mac and Cheese Bowl. It's ooey gooey good. Ooh, cheese. Ooh, chicken. Cheese. Chicken. $5. Chicken. Cheese. $5. Look at all those fill-ups. Popcorn chicken, famous bowl, hot wings, fried chicken and mac and cheese bowl. 5 options for $5 each. Fill up at KFC Nassau.
Being the best doesn't just happen. It requires deliberate hard work. When you set out to be the best, you have to be sure. Sure of your goals. Sure of your abilities. You have to be sure-footed. Sure you're focused. Sure you're ready. Sure you're doing everything right. Never settle for less. Be sure.
What does support look like? What does it sound like when you feel the pulse of a nation? When you make a difference in the lives of strong, principled, cultured people who are driven by hard work and passion. People who build communities where hospitality is warmly demonstrated because this is the Bahamas and we're happy to share our wealth. Commonwealth Bank, built by Bahamians, here for Bahamians. Bahamians helping Bahamians.
The performance speaks for itself. Pennzoil Synthetics, made from natural gas. Make the switch.
Are you ready to get healthy and fit? It's time to get up and get moving. Join me, Bowflex Barbie, for Morning Moves right here on RTV Channel 212 every Monday and Wednesday at 6 and 9 a.m. and Saturdays at 8 and 10 a.m. Come join in fun, exciting workouts with me, my team, and special guests. You'll also get health tips and strategies from our wellness expert. Be sure to follow us on social media at Morning Moves TV and visit morningmovestv.com for loads of bonus content. I can't wait for you to join me for Morning Moves, the perfect way to start your day.
The Financial Voice is sponsored by the Bahamas Ministry of Tourism, Bahamar, Aquapure, KFC, Commonwealth Bank Limited, FOCAL, Doctors Hospital Health System, and Sun Oil.
Welcome back to the Financial Voice, coming to you on the RTV cable channel 212 and streaming at the Financial Voice on Facebook. We're discussing rebuilding Bahamas tourism with our esteemed panel, Subaltern Bethel, Vernice Joaquin, Joy Jibrilu, and Vincent Vanderpool Wallace. Now is the time that we take your questions. Thank you for calling and texting. Firstly, a question from Denise Barnes. What is being proposed as ways to increase productivity in the workplace? And I know, Subaltern, you mentioned that earlier. Which one of you distinguished panelists would like to take that question? Vincent?
Well, I think we talked a little bit about it already, because a great deal of what we are talking about regarding bringing technology to bear on what it is we are doing is one way to increase productivity. You get an individual delivering a lot more value as a result of using a lot of technology. So, I mean, I happen to believe that travel and tourism is probably the most underserved sector of the global economy in terms of using technology. And so the opportunities to be able to do that to increase productivity, I think, are quite substantial. You spoke about some of them, Carrie, in terms of enabling people to book digitally and to book online for a whole variety of products. I mean, when you think about the number of steps that you cut out that a human being has to be involved in when you do it digitally, you suddenly find that one individual is being a great deal more productive. And there's a misconception, it almost leads to something that Bernice was talking about earlier. There's a misconception that somehow the use of technology is substituting for personal service. It is not. The way we use technology is to make personal service even more personal. If I can set up a system where I ask Kerry Fountain for his interests and preferences, and you provide me those interests and preferences, and when you get into your hotel and go into your minibar, you notice that your precise interests and preferences have been delivered to you, that's a far more productive way for us to do things instead of right now, everybody goes, you drink the 2 bottles or whatever it is, they put the 2 bottles back. Well, I just told you that I like that particular thing. Why are you giving me this other stuff that I tell you that I don't want? So, and then it goes on and on in terms of ways to capture interests and preferences and personalize what people are. And there's nothing more powerful than recognizing some way by way of delivering things to them before they even ask for it. So that is the kind of use of technology to increase productivity in ways that are so very, very important. And then one final point. There's 160 million people who've come to the Bahamas between independence and now. We have information on a lot of those people. So instead of us doing things that have to be done on a blanket basis, getting a lot more personalized, directed offers to people, knowing full well they already indicated this is something they want, is a far more efficient way to do things and making people more productive. So the avenues to make people more productive through technology, I think, are legion.
Yeah, and not only productive, but also make the business make more money.
Absolutely.
Okay. Can I just add to that? 2 things to add to it. One is additional exposure of Bahamians involved in the industry abroad, where there are higher levels of productivity in certain destinations. And then secondly, incentives and training, motivation through incentives and training, so that higher productivity is rewarded.
Thank you, Sabi. Joy, Basil Smith, who is the Executive Director of the Association of Bahamas Marinas, as you well know, he asked, can you discuss strategies that will help us capture boating business that has been going south of the Bahamas?
So good evening, Basil. And I have to acknowledge the fact that Basil has just been a stalwart through this period, beginning June 15, when we opened up private aviation, boating and yachting sector. And they have been with us through all the highs and the lows of changes to emergency orders that impacted tourism. We know that the most recent orders have not been tourism friendly. No one wants to come on vacation in place, no matter what we call it. You know, a rose by any other name is still a rose. So we've learned that really clearly. They don't want to be stuck in one place. The beauty about boating in the Bahamas is the multiplicity of islands, our beautiful, pristine waters, the opportunity to fish, to dive, all the things that are the number one drivers of people wanting to travel now. We hope that post 15th of October, and I'm smiling and I have to be very careful that I don't preempt myself, that we have been able to have very fruitful and meaningful conversations with the competent authority, Ministry of Health, really tabling and getting them to understand what needs to be in place for tourism to reopen sustainably and to the benefit of everyone. Travelers, persons working within the industry in the Bahamas, and obviously Bahamians who travel and come back. And we believe that we have reached some agreements, and it's just to fine-tune them, but we will be announcing those. And Basil, I dare suggest that will put boating and yachting back at the forefront of people wanting to choose the Bahamas, knowing that they have an opportunity to travel from Bimini in the north all the way to Nagua in the south and enjoy all the things that they really want to do here. And anyway, they got to pass us to get to the south. So if we make it attractive again for them, then we know that we hopefully will recapture that market once again. But thank you for being such a champion.
Yeah. Like we say, why you would want to go beyond us
is beyond us.
Is beyond us.
Vernice, Airbnb. Yes. Airbnb owners want to know if there will be airlift after October 15th, since no large properties are opening.
But the short answer is yes, but the measured response is yes, kind of. So, so what that simply means is that the airlines are telling us that they have put Bahamas flights into their schedules right through to December. And that includes all of the usual carriers, Delta, United, Southwest, etc. And so we have their schedules through to December. But again, a lot of that is subject to change depending on what we do next. And I think that's what Joy has been alluding to, that there's a plan to find a way to help us to be much more attractive with respect to this whole quarantine issue that's been an impediment, if you will. And so once we develop that plan and we can announce that, I think we can be, Airbnb owners and operators can be assured that there'll be adequate airlift to bring people to them. That's the way I would put that, yes. Yeah, so not to worry.
And I think one of the things that has to happen too is our domestic airlines. You talk about being adaptive and flexible. They cannot continue to fly the same schedules that they had in place pre-COVID-19.
Yeah.
And they have to, and so in order to, if you're offering service to the family islands, their flights have to be aligned with the flights that are coming into Nassau.
Yes.
Which would allow same-day connection.
That's correct.
And I think our national flag carrier needs to be the first one to set that example.
Harry, I just wanted to add to Vernice's answer. And, you know, in these strange times that we're living in, where there are so many restrictions to travel, it always amazes me, and I ponder on it, that there is this pent-up demand for travel to the Bahamas. We've had continuous conversations with our airline partners as recent as today, one of our major airline partners, and they say they are seeing this pent-up demand for the Bahamas above any other destination in the Caribbean. And we're seeing this from our travel agents, our tour operators as well. So they're in this with us. They know that once we start getting our act together and we open up and we are consistent with measures that we put in place, they want to be here with us. So I want to offer that as a word of encouragement and the light at the end of this tunnel, that we have found true partners. And Vernice, I think you'd agree with me.
Absolutely.
Partners.
Absolutely.
Joy, I have another question for you, and it's regarding Bay Street. And I know that would bring a smile to your face.
Yes.
Regarding Bay Street, before tourism opens, what are the efforts to clean up downtown? With the Downtown Committee and many other organizations that are trying to improve downtown, what is the short-term approach to clean up or spruce up?
This is a great question and the bane of all of our lives. I said this very recently, and I'm going to say it again. You know, and Vernice came out the gate with, she was speaking on the pulpit and with such honesty and, you know, from her heart. And I speak about that when I speak about downtown, because I see it every day. And I always say, as Bahamians, we're hospitable people. And we had when I was growing up, that you had what we called, and I don't know how many others called it that, a front room. Your front room, and that was your bedroom. And that was only for your visitors, you know, because it's best for them. And I don't know where we've lost that. The Bay Street, which is our front room for the capital of the Bahamas, it has been allowed to get in the state that it's in. And I know that there are multiple reasons for it. but it needs that collaborative approach. It's going to be public-private sector initiative where we all have to come together, and Vincent's smiling, so he has something up his sleeve, but we all have to come together and work on this, but we cannot be proud. Now, I have been talking with a group of people, and we're talking about things that we can do, but the Downtown Nassau Partnership, working with us, the Nassau Cruise Port, a lot of us, there are things that we would like to do so that when we reopen, it certainly looks a little bit better than it does now, but it's nowhere near where it needs to be. And public sector, as well as the private sector, we are collectively responsible, and we collectively have a duty to make it what it should be.
Kerry, can I take 30 seconds just to follow up on something?
Absolutely.
I think the statute of limitations is passed on this, but once upon a time, there was somebody by the name of Bernice Walkian that did an analysis of all the buildings on Bay Street. This is before the Ministry of Tourism building burned down. The study was never published. Why? The worst building on Bay Street was the Ministry of Tourism building. So, but you know, that's a very, very important part of in terms of the front door. But in addition to that, I mean, what I know is happening right now is something that's quite positive, which is Arawak Key. The Arawak Key vendors are getting together and beginning to recognize that they need to put themselves in such a place that it's a highly desirable place for all visitors coming to Nassau and Paradise Island for them to come to. So for the first time, I think you're going to see something very special coming out of Arawak Key, because when we start talking about cultural tourism and heritage tourism and getting to understand tourism in an environment where lots of Bahamians are involved, Arawak Key is the closest one to that. So when you have this development of downtown Nassau, and it's extended all the way up to Arawak Key, I think it's going to be a very special kind of experience for all visitors.
I know, Kerry, that people are tired of asking the question about downtown, and they've heard it all before. And you know, to just cut to the chase, the biggest challenge we face is that there's so many disparate property owners in downtown that to get them all to commit to a single plan to revamp, revitalize the whole downtown experience has been a huge challenge. As Vincent said, going back to 1993, you know, we've been starting and stopping efforts to make some improvements, and there are always impediments and what have you. But I think to Joy's point that now we have the best opportunity, particularly because of what's going on at the Nassau Port, at the Nassau Cruise Port, to really encompass the whole downtown area and make some improvements. Now, people are going to say, but that might take some time. That is true, but there's also a plan in development to do some immediate improvements to the whole downtown area. So that's what Joy was getting at. I happen to be the co-chair of the Downtown Nassau Partnership, so I'm aware of it. And so we propose to make that effective pretty soon.
Yeah, I always, one of the things I remember Vincent preaching was, if you want to improve downtown, let Bahamians live downtown.
True.
I'm happy to see condo development starting to happen, because, you know, if I'm coming off a cruise and I'm seeing where the locals are hanging out on Bay Street, guess what? That's where I want to go to. Joy, I have one question for you, and I think I have one for...
Yeah, with regard to the downtown, I think you hit on something which is vital. That we're going to improve the downtown. We're going to have people living in it. And there have been plans over the years which have pointed to this. And all we have to do is to dust them off and get to work.
Yeah. So, Baltimore, we have a question that I'd like to pose to you. And it is regarding, again, economic development. How can we leverage this tendency to benefit rather than harm peerless family island environments?
What was the word that you used for before family island, please?
Peerless.
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 Because the whole point behind the question is travelers are tending to steer away from, particularly so now with COVID, they're tending to steer away from densely populated urban centers and attractions. Mm-hmm. So how can we leverage this tendency to benefit rather than harm peerless family island environments?
First of all, let me point out, as Joy did earlier, that there's a great demand for travel to the Bahamas. And with all of its shortcomings, certainly the Bahamas is looked at as paradise of a vacation, and the family islands are the crown jewels. Now, if we're going to keep them as the crown jewels, it means that we must be able to attract a type of visitor to the family islands that value their quaintness, the culture, and the natural beauty of the family islands. Is needed, of course, in order to keep them peerless and to keep them pristine, is to ensure that we market a profile that would appreciate what the family islands have to offer. And again, COVID could be a blessing in disguise for the family islands in that persons of means would like to be able to vacation in areas which are uncrowded and where they can enjoy the natural surroundings and where there is not only natural beauty, but there are the benefits which can be derived health-wise. You can go on a beach in the family islands and you can be the only person on the beach. There's also the great value of the environment, of the marine environment that's there. And so it's a crown jewel of our Bahamian vacation experience. So that you're not really looking for the big crowds, but really are looking for sizable numbers who can appreciate the different segments culturally that the family islands have to offer.
Okay. I think we're approaching break, and we have three questions that I would like to pose I'd really like for all of you to answer. So they're more like rapid response questions in the next segment. But again, panel, I want to thank you. You're watching TCL Group's The Financial Voice, Rebuilding Bahamas Tourism.
Welcome to Doctors Hospital. As the Bahamas reopens, we at Doctors Hospital have been hard at work preparing for the new normal. The health and safety of our patients, associates, and others entering the hospital space is ever paramount and shapes the experience as you enter our facilities. All persons entering the hospital will be COVID screened, which includes a temperature check and a few short questions. There's also mandatory hand and shoe washing stations upon entry. Masks are required and can be provided if necessary. To further limit contact, Doctors Hospital has launched a concierge service that allows for pre-registration, a hospital itinerary, in-car waiting, and a navigator to guide you through your visit. Our pharmacy is now offering curbside pickup and delivery services for prescriptions as well. Social distancing markers are placed around the facility, and scheduling for imaging, including CAT scans, mammograms, and 3T MRIs. Laboratory, including our new same-day COVID-19 PCR testing, rehabilitation, and other services, has also been adjusted. Doctors Hospital is here to serve you with the same quality and care that you've come to expect, even as we enter a new normal. Now, more than ever, Doctors Hospital continues to be trusted and best care now. Isn't your health worth it?
Since 1967, Freeport Oil Company Limited has been dedicated to fueling growth and prosperity in the Bahamas. We have been a constant pillar within the country, striving to invest and support our community through the best of times and the worst of times. For us, FOCOL represents 21 years of strength and consistency, consistent leadership, consistent growth, consistent customer service. Through it all, we are resilient. FOCOL, fueling growth for people.
Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. Topping news tonight.
COVID-19 remains a serious threat.
Coronavirus COVID-19 has disrupted our economy, tourism industry, educational system, and put our healthcare facilities and professionals on high alert. Are you prepared? Do you have all the facts? Stay tuned to this network for the very latest news and information on this global pandemic.
The Financial Voice is sponsored by the Bahamas Ministry of Tourism, Bahamar, Aquapure, KFC, Commonwealth Bank Limited, FOCAL, Doctors Hospital Health System, and Sun Oil.
Welcome back to the Financial Voice, coming to you on RTV, cable channel 212, and streaming at the Financial Voice on Facebook. We have been discussing rebuilding Bahamas tourism with our esteemed panel of tourism experts, Subaltern Bethel, Vernice Joaquin, Joy Gibralou, and Vincent Vanderpool Wallace. Joy, before we get to some of the wrap-up questions, there was one question I had in here regarding cruise lines, and that is, what is the expected time for the cruise industry to resume in the Bahamas?
This has been a question on so many people's lips. I've been asked this over and repeatedly, and it's a great question. It's an obvious question. We know that at the moment, all cruise lines sailing from the United States of America are subject to a no-sail order by the CDC, Center for Disease Control, and that order has been extended numerous times. Most recent order goes through to October 31st. And the reason for that is the CDC, working in collaboration with the cruise lines, they're coming up with protocols that will be in place when cruising resumes. I do know that a draft proposal came out, in fact, just this week, talking about some of the protocols that were in place, and the CDC also issued one for the cruise lines. And I think once this is agreed to, we can see the return to some form of cruising again. Date is not known. We know that expectations are high, and curiously, we know that the demand for cruising is very, very high. All the cruise lines are reporting incredible bookings for 2021. So those cruisers who they want to get back, they are not concerned with what's in place. And part of the follow-up question to what you asked me is people always saying, well, are they coming to Nassau and Grand Bahama? The Minister of Tourism has made it very clear that that will be an expectation of government. We know that naturally they would want to go to their island, private island attractions. It makes sense for the reasons that Subaltern talked about with the beauty of the family islands, because you can control it from a public health and safety point of view. But those protocols are already established for ports of entry, Nassau and Grand Bahama, and we would want to see the controlled return of cruising to Nassau and Grand Bahama as well.
Okay. Another question, I haven't heard anyone mentioning the heads of agreements as it relates to cruise lines. Since the pandemic, many cruise lines have been taking refuge in our waters without having to pay our government $1. I don't know if that's correct because they're registered. But what are your views on renegotiating?
So, Subaltern, you want to?
Well, there are, first of all, a number of concerns. One is an environmental concern. I'm very, very concerned to learn, or to hear, that cruise ships, Bahamian registered cruise ships, which are in Bahamian waters, are anchored instead of being tied to buoys. No cruise ship should be allowed to there should be fixed buoys that should be put down because with the dragging of the anchors and the chains, there's certainly going to be destruction to coral reefs. So, for one, that needs to be addressed. Secondly, with cruise ships being registered in the Bahamas as a large cruise ship registry, the Bahamas is duty bound to afford two cruise ships the right to port within the destination. The question though arises is, at what cost? Are they doing so for free? Certainly that should be an added cost to the registration costs there. And then there is the question of the future of cruising with so many of the private islands which are being developed, which are attractions in themselves. There is the absolute necessity to ensure that many of the attractions as possible on those private islands are either operated by or owned by Bahamians, which is currently not the case for the most part. And so that's an issue which also needs to be addressed. And then lastly, with the COVID protocol, to what extent are the COVID protocols being enforced on board these cruise ships, which are anchored in Bahamian waters and which will in the future cruise in Bahamian waters? I think we ought to be clear on that, not only from a point of view of the U.S. health authorities, but that they should be conforming with Bahamian protocols.
Thank you, Subaltern. One question, can you explain why can Bahamians or why can the Bahamas implement the quick tests that the airlines are advocating? And I think we answered that already. Still, to get into the Bahamas, you need the COVID-19 RT-PCR test. But I know because the industry has been encouraged to test their employees, the hotel operators have been encouraged. We are looking as an industry, not just who I work for, but the bigger hotels, the smaller hotels, the Ministry of Tourism, the Hotel Association. We're looking at how we can pool our resources to buy the most effective rapid tests that will deliver, like I said, not only effective results, but also at a very low cost or affordable cost, and within a 10 to 15 minute period of time. So that is for that. But I do want to get to some of the wrap-up questions. Subaltern, this one is for you. What is some ground that we have gained in tourism? And I'm asking you this because you're the if I respectfully can say this, the grandfather of us all. But what is some ground that we have gained in tourism over the years, and what are the biggest challenges facing Bahamas tourism today? If you could what is the biggest challenge, and what is the biggest opportunity?
Well, I would rather think that I'm a father rather than a grandfather.
That was for want of a better word.
The Bahamas could be justly proud of the grounds which we have gained in tourism over the years, particularly with regard to the more upscale product that we have been developing, the luxury product, and how the product has become varied, as well as the skilled workforce. You know, we're talking about improving productivity, but the Bahamas is one of the best skilled workforces in the tourism industry. So these have been definite grounds. We have seen some improvement in the linkages between tourism and other sectors of the economy, although there is still much room for improvement. Then we come to the matter of what are some of the biggest challenges facing the Bahamas today. And the biggest challenges, I think, go back to something which I said earlier. The biggest challenge today is competition, in which we need to be able to compete, not so much price-wise, but in the delivery of quality value for money. Another challenge is the need to review continue to renew the product, particularly the older elements of the product. Successful destinations, particularly old destinations like the Bahamas, continue to be attractive as we add to the product. And of course, our biggest challenge right now is COVID-19.
Yeah.
We continue to resolutely address COVID-19 in terms of the protocols which are in place, and that we expand our capacity, the capacity of our health services, not only to deal with the current pandemic, but also to give the assurance to many visitors. We are looking now today and into the future between 6 and 10 million visitors are coming into the Bahamas. They want to feel safe once they come into the Bahamas, that if they get sick, that there are primary facilities which are readily available to them, not only in New Providence, but also in Grand Bahama and in the family islands.
Thank you, Subaltern. I'd like to ask that same question and just brief answers. Joy, starting with you. Biggest challenge, one.
I think Subaltern did such a great job in enunciating them. But challenges, we've talked about it. Those linkages. We look at the fact that the numbers of our visitors, they've increased, both stopover visitors and cruise passenger visitors. And yet visitor spend is not where it should be, particularly from those cruise passengers. So what do we do to ensure that we get greater benefit from these visitors who are coming here? Vincent talked about it. We're looking at overseas repatriation by foreign investors, large tourism enterprises, so bringing it back to the linkages. Those are challenges that I'd like to see us address. They present opportunities too, but if we look at it, challenges, aging product. We talked about Bay Street. That stands out, but it's not just Bay Street. That's across the Commonwealth of Bahamas. We've got to look at that, addressing that. Things for people to do when they get to the destination. They desperately want activities. They want to go out. They want nightlife. These are opportunities too, conversely.
Fernice, biggest challenge?
I think to a significant extent, infrastructure, tourism infrastructure, particularly for the family islands. It's one thing to say that the family islands are quaint and, you'll have a rustic kind of experience and whatnot. When it comes to airports and roads and ports and whatnot, we have the biggest challenge of any of our competitors in the region because we have so many islands. If we were Barbados, we would be off the charts. Like we would be well ahead of anybody if we had one island, is what the point I'm making. And so to have to replicate a lot of infrastructure in multiple islands, that's our biggest challenge. How do we get quality infrastructure so that, Bahamians and our visitors can get into and out of these respective islands in efficiently, safely, and so on. And that's the biggest challenge. The cost of developing such infrastructure multiple times, and because of the variety of islands we have. But that's also our biggest opportunity. The fact that we have that diversity, that variety of islands, nowhere as close to the United States does such a product exist as what we have to offer here in the Bahamas, where we have that diversity and variety that Subaltern talked about earlier, that is just off the east coast of the United States. I mean, look at the number of people who live all along that eastern seaboard, and the fact that, in 2 hours and change, they can be in any one of these islands in the Bahamas and have a different experience depending on where they're going. We have the benefit of being close by, having that variety, but that variety also comes at a cost, and that's infrastructure. So,
Vincent, biggest challenge. Thank you, Vernice.
Yeah, but I think it's been said. It's just a matter of reinforcing the things that have been said. The biggest mistake that I think we have made is not educating ourselves. The biggest challenge is we don't know who we are. We have no idea what we have in terms of quality of product. The simple fact is the Bahamas is a region. The Bahamas is not a destination like Vernice was talking about. And so the point I say to people all the time, if you go from Puerto Rico to Trinidad, it's the same distance as between Abaco and Anagua. And we have many more islands in between, and many of our islands are bigger than the countries of the Caribbean. We want that to sink into people's heads because they don't seem to understand that. Second of all, we find ourselves in this peculiar situation where we are the third wealthiest country in the Western Hemisphere, independent country in the Western Hemisphere, largely based on tourism. Let that sink in. And guess what? 80% of our tourism is on 2% of our land.
Yep.
So when people start telling me that we have exhausted tourism, we have to go to look for something else, we have an opportunity that is incredible. You know how many people get on their knees every single day in the Lower Caribbean and say, Lord, please move me to where Andros is. Because if I were there, I could do all kinds of opportunities. So the biggest thing we have to do, the biggest challenge is getting Bahamians to understand who we are and what we have, and then doing what Vernice said. When we start talking about the transportation, there's got to be, first of all, is visibility. People got to know that these places exist. Second of all, it's got to be accessibility. I got to get there very easily. Right. And third of all, is affordability. I can't pay a fortune in terms of being able to get there. And we got right next door, and this is one of the things the Ministry of Tourism has done with this Bahamas pre-clearance in Florida, the opportunity for people to go directly to an island of their interest instead of having to come through some other place, which makes all the difference in the world. Because what is very important is that this 80% is very vulnerable for our economy. I mean, imagine we got to diversify our economic centers too. Diversify the economy. We got to make sure we move our tourism around so that any one hit of a hurricane in one place doesn't wipe out the whole thing, God forbid. So that is the biggest challenge, as Bernie says, the biggest opportunity at the same time.
Very well said. I'm going to throw you all a curveball. So, Subaltern, when you're allowed to travel, which island are you going to travel to in the Bahamas?
I can answer that.
Pardon me?
Eleuthera. Right, Subaltern?
Eleuthera, my home.
There you go.
What part?
Matter Point, Governor's Harbor.
Okay. Vernice?
Exuma.
What part?
Georgetown.
Vincent?
Well, I'm searching my heritage, the combination of Anagua, Andros, and Eleuthera. So that's me.
You mix up like house salad, Vincent.
Yeah, and then Mayaguana for another very special reason, which we'll talk about later.
And my current Director General?
That's a hard one because I have Eleuthera right here on one hand, Andros on the other, so they obviously stand tall. But I've had a desire to go to Cat Island, and I'm going to make that happen. I'm going where I've never been, and that really stands out. I'm looking forward to that.
Excellent. Me? I want to go back to Long Island.
Yeah.
A good one.
That brings us to the end of a very impactful and enjoyable session. And it's so funny, we talk about rebuilding Bahamas tourism. And what I'm getting from all of you is we really need to educate Bahamians on the opportunities that are available in the business of tourism. But the TCL Group is brand owner and producer of the Financial Voice. TCL's executive producer, Joan Albury, and her fine team of professionals are deeply grateful to you, our distinguished panel, for your invaluable input. Director General Joy Gibralou and former Directors General Vernice Joaquin, Subaltern Bethel, and Vincent Vanderpool Wallace. Special thanks also to Financial Voice partner, RTV, Cable Channel 212, our generous sponsors, and to you, our audience. I'm Kerry Fountain. Good night.
The Financial Voice was sponsored by the Bahamas Ministry of Tourism, Bahamar, Aquapure, KFC, Commonwealth Bank Limited, FOCAL, Doctors Hospital Health System, and Sun Oil.